When I asked my son when the wedding was, and my daughter-in-law said, "We're getting married tomorrow," I didn't know what to say. For a moment, it felt like the whole world went still around me. I stood there, holding the phone to my ear, hearing her words, but they didn't sound real. Tomorrow. They were getting married tomorrow. My son, my only boy, had found the woman he wanted to spend his life with, and somehow, I wasn't part of it. I tried to keep my voice steady, but my throat felt tight and my hands began to tremble. "Oh," I said softly, almost whispering, That's wonderful news." She said something about how it all came together last minute, that it was just going to be small and simple, nothing fancy. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and said, "Well, that's nice." But when I hung up the phone, I sat there for a long time in the quiet of my little kitchen, listening to the clock tick on the wall. I looked around the room at the old family photos I'd hung years ago. My son, smiling in his graduation cap, his arm around me, that proud grin he used to have. I remembered when he was small, how he'd run to me with scraped knees and muddy shoes, how he'd wrap his arms around my waist and say, "I love you, Mama." I never thought there'd come a day when I wouldn't be part of his big moments. I never thought I'd have to ask when my own son was getting married, only to be told it was happening tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the sound of the refrigerator hum and the faint barking of a neighbor's dog outside. My chest felt heavy, like there was a stone pressing down on it. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I just stared at the ceiling, replaying that phone call over and over in my mind. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that he was happy, and that was all that should matter to a mother. But the truth was, I felt left out, forgotten. Like, somehow, without realizing it, I had drifted so far from my own child that he didn't even think to have me there on the most important day of his life. In the morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the sunlight spill across the yard. I thought about calling him again, but I didn't. I didn't want to make him feel guilty. I just wanted to hear his voice one more time before he became someone else's husband. I whispered a small prayer right there by the window. "Lord, please watch over him, and please don't let him forget his mother completely." The morning after that call, I went about my usual chores, trying to keep myself busy. I washed the dishes, fed the cat, watered the little potted plants by the sink. The radio played softly in the background, an old country song that made me think of Sunday mornings when my son was little, when we used to dance in the kitchen while pancakes sizzled on the stove. Those were the days when everything felt simple. Back then, it was just the two of us. His father left when he was 5. One day he said he was going to the store, and he just didn't come back. I tried to be both mother and father after that. It wasn't easy. There were nights I'd stay up sewing clothes, trying to make ends meet, praying he wouldn't feel the emptiness his father left behind. But my boy, he was always bright, always smiling. He used to say, "Mama, one day I'll buy you a big house so you never have to worry again." I'd laugh and tell him all I wanted was for him to be happy. And for a long time, he was. He went off to college on a scholarship, the first in our family to do that. I remember standing in the driveway when he drove away, waving until I couldn't see his car anymore. My chest ached with pride and sadness. The house was too quiet without him. But every Sunday he'd call, no matter how busy he was. He'd tell me about his classes, his friends, the part-time job he got at the library. I'd listen and smile, imagining him out there, making a life for himself. Then, when he graduated, he got a job in the city. He called less often after that, but I understood. Life gets busy. People grow. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who made him feel tied down or guilty. When he brought his girlfriend home for the first time, I was nervous. I wanted her to like me. She was polite, but quiet. Pretty girl, smart too. She worked in marketing, I think. I tried to make her feel comfortable. I cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, the same meal my son always loved growing up. I remember she barely touched her food. My son said she was on a diet, but I could tell there was something else. She kept glancing at her phone, answering texts during dinner. I told myself not to read too much into it. Young people are different now, I thought. They don't mean to be rude, they just live in a world that moves too fast. That night, after they left, I sat by the window again and watched their car disappear down the road. I felt something tug at my chest, but I couldn't quite name it. Maybe it was just that old feeling, knowing that your child is slowly building a life that doesn't include you as much anymore. As months passed, our phone calls got shorter. Sometimes he'd call just to say he was busy but wanted to check in. Other times, it'd go to voicemail, and I'd leave a message saying, "Just calling to hear your voice, honey. Hope you're well." I'd hang up, then sit there in the silence, feeling the weight of the years between us. Then one day, he mentioned he was thinking about proposing to her. My heart leapt. I told him how happy I was for him, how I couldn't wait to help plan the wedding, to be there, to see him take that next big step in life. He laughed a little and said, "We'll see, Mom. It might just be something small." I brushed it off, thinking he meant small like in a park or a courthouse, but still with family around. Never, not in my wildest dreams, did I think small would mean without you. The next time we spoke, he sounded distracted. I asked if they'd set a date yet. He said not yet, that they were figuring things out. I didn't push. I've always believed grown children deserve their space. But I started to notice a shift. He wasn't calling as much. When I'd text, sometimes it took days to hear back. Then when he did, it was always short, just a few words like, "Doing good, Mom," or "Busy with work." I told myself it was normal. Kids move on, life gets in the way. But deep down, I missed the sound of his voice, the warmth in it, the way he used to say, "Love you, Mom," without thinking. I'd sit in my chair in the evenings, knitting or reading, pretending I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. Then came that call, the one where I asked when the wedding was, and his fiancée answered. I still remember her voice, cheerful but distant. "Oh, hi, this is Sarah. You must be Mark's mom. I just wanted to let you know we're getting married tomorrow." It was like a knife twisting in my chest. Tomorrow. No invitation, no chance to be there, no explanation beyond, it just came together last minute. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask if I'd done something wrong. But instead, I smiled through the ache and said, "That's wonderful, dear. I'm so happy for you both." And when I hung up, the tears finally came. They weren't angry tears, just soft, quiet ones that slipped down my face as I sat there, in the dim kitchen, holding on to the phone, realizing that somewhere along the way, I'd gone from being his whole world to just a name on his contact list. That night, I pulled out the photo album from the cupboard. I ran my fingers over the pictures, his first day of school, his high school graduation, the two of us at the park with ice cream cones in our hands. I whispered to the pictures, "You did so well, my boy. You became everything I hoped you'd be." And then, softly, I added, "I just wish you'd remembered to take me with you."
They weren't angry tears, just soft, quiet ones that slipped down my face as I sat there in the dim kitchen, holding onto the phone, realizing that somewhere along the way, I'd gone from being his whole world to just a name on his contact list. That night, I pulled out the photo album from the cupboard. I ran my fingers over the pictures: his first day of school, his high school graduation, the two of us at the park with ice cream cones in our hands. I whispered to the pictures, "You did so well, my boy. You became everything I hoped you'd be." And then, softly, I added, "I just wish you'd remembered to take me with you."
The day of the wedding came and went, and I went about it like any other day. I made myself some toast, tidied up the house, swept the porch, and tried not to think about what was happening somewhere else. I tried not to picture my son in a suit, standing under some arch of flowers, saying his vows while everyone clapped. I tried not to imagine her in white, smiling up at him, or how happy they must have looked together. But the mind has a way of wandering where you wish it wouldn't. Every time I walked past a mirror, I caught sight of myself and thought, that's a mother who wasn't invited to her own son's wedding. It wasn't an angry thought, just a sad one, the kind of sadness that sits in your bones. I went to church that Sunday like I always do. People there know me. They asked how Mark was doing, if the wedding had happened yet. I smiled and said yes, it was lovely, though I hadn't been there to see it. One of the older ladies, Mrs. Turner, patted my hand and said, "You must be so proud." I nodded, holding that smile steady until I could get back to my pew and sit down. I kept my eyes on the hymn book so nobody would see the tears forming. When I got home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The late afternoon light was coming through the trees, warm and golden, and for a moment I thought about calling him. I thought about saying, I hope it was a beautiful day. But then I stopped myself. What if he thought I was trying to make him feel bad? What if he didn't want to talk about it? So I didn't call. I told myself he'd call me when he was ready. A week passed, then 2, then a month. I tried to stay busy. I joined a quilting circle at the community center, started walking every morning, even began baking again. Still, every night before bed, I'd check my phone just to make sure I hadn't missed his call. One afternoon, a letter came in the mail. It was from him. My heart leapt when I saw his handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a photo, him and his new wife, standing on a beach, barefoot in the sand, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. There was a short note. It said, "Hey Mom, hope you're doing okay. We decided to do something spontaneous and just go for it. Sorry for the short notice. Love you." That was it. No explanation, no invitation to visit, just a photo and a few lines that sounded more like something you'd write to a distant relative than your mother. I stared at the picture for a long time. He looked happy, and that should have been enough. I told myself that over and over, but I couldn't help feeling like a chapter had closed and I hadn't even been allowed to read it. I placed the photo in a frame on my mantle. Every morning I'd look at it and whisper, "You look handsome, my boy. I'm glad you're happy." A few weeks later, my neighbor Judy invited me over for coffee. She's a kind woman, about my age, with silver hair and a soft laugh. She asked how my son was doing, and I told her about the wedding, how I found out only the day before. She put her cup down and said, "Oh, honey, that must have hurt." I smiled and said, "It's all right. Kids these days do things differently." But she looked at me the way only another mother can look at you, like she sees the truth even when you're trying to hide it. She said, "You don't deserve that. You raised that boy on your own. He should have wanted you there." I shrugged and said, maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I held on too tight. But the truth was, I didn't know what I'd done wrong. The days grew longer. Sometimes I'd find myself setting 2 plates at the table out of habit, then quietly putting one back. Sometimes I'd walk past the old swing in the yard where he used to sit and think about how time has a way of stealing things without you noticing. I told myself I wasn't lonely, just quiet. There's a difference, though the line between them gets thin sometimes. Then, about 3 months after the wedding, I got a call. It was my son. His voice sounded cheerful, maybe a little nervous. "Hey, Mom, how have you been?" I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my tone light. "I've been fine, sweetheart. How is marriage life treating you?" He laughed a little and said, "It's good, really good. We've been busy." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. I wanted to ask why I hadn't been invited. I wanted to say that my heart had ached every day since that call. But instead, I said, "I'm glad you're happy." He said, "Yeah, we are." Then after a pause, he said, "We'll come visit soon, okay?" I said, "You don't have to rush." And then there was silence for a few seconds before he said, "Love you, Mom." And I said it back. After we hung up, I sat there holding the phone, listening to the quiet. That night, I took out one of his old baseball caps from a box in my closet and held it close. It still smelled faintly like him, like grass and sunshine and youth. I thought about how strange it was that you can spend your whole life giving love, teaching someone what it means to care, and still find yourself waiting for them to remember how it felt. That's when I started writing him letters, not to send, just to write. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the evenings and pour my thoughts onto paper, things I wished I could say out loud. I'm proud of you. I forgive you. I miss you. I'd fold the letters neatly and keep them in a box by my bed. It made me feel close to him somehow, like my words could still reach him through the quiet spaces between us. After that visit, things changed in quiet, subtle ways. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just small shifts, like the way sunlight moves across a room during the day. Mark started calling more often. Not every day, but enough that I noticed. Sometimes he'd call just to check in, to ask how I was doing, or to share a bit about work. His voice always carried that soft mix of guilt and affection, and each time I let him know I was all right. I didn't bring up the past anymore. I didn't ask why I wasn't told about the wedding or why I hadn't met her parents. I realized that holding on to those questions only kept me stuck in the sadness. So instead, I focused on the moments we had, the short talks, the shared laughter, the way his voice would soften when he said goodbye. That became enough for me. In time, Sarah began to call too. It surprised me the first time she did. She said, "Hi, Mom," and I almost didn't know how to respond. She'd never called me that before. But her tone was warm, gentle, almost shy. She told me she was trying to make one of Mark's favorite dishes and wanted my recipe. I laughed softly, gave her the details, and told her not to forget the little pinch of nutmeg, the secret he'd never figured out. We ended up talking for nearly an hour that day. She told me about her work, her family, and their new apartment. I could feel her trying, genuinely trying, to build something with me, and that touched me deeply. Over the months, our connection slowly grew. Sometimes she'd send me photos, Mark fixing up their garden, her baking something new, even a picture of the two of them sitting on their porch with coffee. I'd look at those pictures for a long time, letting them fill the empty corners of my quiet house. There was one afternoon when she called and said, "We'd love to have you visit sometime, maybe next month?" My heart felt light. I said, "I'd love that, dear." When I hung up, I sat by the window and just breathed for a while. Forgiveness had been a long road, one that started not with a grand apology, but with small acts of love that built their way back into my life. I realized then that holding on to bitterness doesn't protect you, it just keeps you lonely. And I had been lonely for far too long. When I finally went to visit them, it was a bright spring day. Their house was small, but full of warmth. Sarah had made tea, and Mark looked so happy to see me. He showed me around proudly, their garden, their little office, the kitchen where they cooked together. I stood there, watching them move around, teasing each other, laughing, and I felt something inside me soften completely. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It wasn't pain. It was pride. Pride that my son had built a home, a life filled with love. That night, as we sat on their porch watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful for you, for everything." I smiled, my eyes wet. "You don't have to say it, Mark. I know." He took my hand, and we just sat there in silence. The world felt still, peaceful. For the first time in years, I felt whole. When I returned home a few days later, I walked into my quiet house and didn't feel the same emptiness anymore. The silence didn't ache. It felt calm. It felt like peace. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and thought about life, how it twists and turns, how love can drift and still find its way back. I thought about all the mothers who might be sitting alone like I once did, wondering if their children have forgotten them. And I wanted to tell them this: they haven't. Sometimes life just pulls them away for a while, but love, real love, has a way of circling back. You just have to keep the door open, even if it hurts. Because one day they'll come home again, and when they do, all that waiting, all that quiet patience, it will have been worth it. The seasons have changed a few times since that visit, And now, when I look out at the trees in my yard, I see the years passing in their colors: the soft green of spring, the warm gold of autumn, and the quiet white of winter. Each season feels like a chapter of my life, some filled with noise and laughter, others with silence and waiting. But these days, the silence no longer feels heavy. It feels earned. It feels like peace. I still live alone in the same small house where Mark grew up. The photos on the walls haven't changed much, though I've added a few new ones. Him and Sarah at their anniversary dinner, a picture of their new puppy, and one of the three of us sitting together on their porch. Every time I pass by them, I smile. Not the forced kind of smile I used to wear to hide my pain, but a gentle one, the kind that comes from forgiveness and acceptance. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I sit on the porch with a blanket wrapped around me and think about how life teaches us in the strangest ways. When I was younger, I thought love meant holding tight, never letting go, never allowing distance or silence to come between us. But now I know that love can also mean stepping back, trusting that the people you raised will find their way, even if it's not the path you expected. It took me years to understand that forgiveness isn't something you give when someone says sorry. It's something you choose for your own heart, even if no apology ever comes. I think about that night years ago when I sat waiting for a call that never came, wondering why my son didn't need me anymore. I remember the ache, the tears, the long nights whispering prayers into the dark. And I realize now that was part of the journey too. That pain shaped the softness I have today. That waiting taught me patience, and that silence taught me how to listen, not just to others, but to myself. These days, Mark and Sarah visit me often. Sometimes they bring me groceries, sometimes just stories and laughter. I never expect anything, so every small gesture feels like a gift. On Sundays, Mark helps me in the garden, the same one he used to play in as a little boy. He still hums when he works, the same tune he used to hum when he was 10. I stand there watching him, remembering how small his hands once were, how he used to run to me with scraped knees and wild dreams. Life moves fast. Children grow up, parents grow old, and somewhere in between, we all learn to say goodbye to the way things were. But I've learned that goodbye doesn't always mean the end. Sometimes it just means see you differently. I still have moments when I miss the old days, when the house was loud, when dinner was a mess of laughter and chatter, when I was still the center of their little world. But those memories don't hurt anymore. They warn me, like sunlight through an old window. And when I hear Mark call me mom now, it feels new again, like a word I had forgotten the sound of and finally remembered. I guess that's what healing sounds like. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that love doesn't vanish. It changes shape. It stretches to fit the years, the distance, the misunderstandings. But it stays, quiet, patient, waiting for us to find our way back to it. Sometimes we spend so much time looking for grand gestures of love that we miss the small ones: a phone call, a visit, a smile, a recipe shared over the phone. But those are the real things that hold us together. That's what family is. Tonight, as I sit here writing these thoughts down, the air outside smells like rain. I can hear it starting to fall softly against the window, just like it used to when Mark was little and would crawl into my bed because he didn't like the thunder. I close my eyes and smile, and for a moment, I can almost hear his small voice again. "It's okay, Mom, I'm here." And in that moment, I whisper softly to the rain, "I'm here too, my love. I always have been." Life has given me many reasons to cry, but it has also given me countless reasons to forgive, to love, and to keep owing. And that's what I'll leave behind. Not anger, not disappointment, but love.
Because in the end, that's what remains when everything else fades. Love, the quiet, steady kind that never asks for anything in return.